Safety hearing. Renette Relaford is the Executive Director. Could you introduce who you have here today? And then I would like you to start with an overview of, and state your accomplishments for last year, and then we'll go from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. To my right, we have Peter McCarthy, our board chair. We have Clifford Ryans in the audience, and my legal secretary, Juan Mattia Donzo, present with us at this time.
So if you could maybe give us an overview and then a couple of accomplishments.
Okay, so in the 2018-2019 year, the CRB worked really hard on increasing our visibility in the community by participating in a lot more outreach events that were run by citizen organizations, more so than we have done in the past. We've also increased communications with the Syracuse Police Department by establishing routine meetings that we had with Chief Fowler at the time. We met with SPD, use of force parties in their department related to use of force, and we attended the Civilian Academy. We also met with the police department with regard to the conciliation process, which is in our ordinance that has yet to be established, and tried to work out a avenue to establish that, and we had some good talking points that we need to revisit again. We also increased communication with the Office of Professional Standards related to the police department's policies and recommendations and their procedures. We also increased my education with regard to being the primary investigator in the office by attending internal affairs investigations in Nashville, Tennessee, by attending a use of force summit in Connecticut, and also by attending our national conference that happens every year for NACOL. We hired 2 private investigators. We met with the current Chief Buckner, who agreed to reestablish the Police Liaison Committee to rectify the backlog that we experienced with regard to the Office of Professional Standards, and to make an attempt to ensure that the CRB is receiving the reports in a more timely manner, and also to catch up on the backlog that he spoke of in his meeting. And we are trying to increase the transparency that the police department gives to the CRB in response to our findings letters. We also met with Mayor Walsh, Deputy Mayor Owens, Corporation Counsel, and the Public Safety Committee to discuss the CRB and SPD communications, City Hall relations, and things of that nature. We have reorganized the office, streamlined some office procedures. We've decreased the backlog of cases from 2016 and 2017. We hired a legal secretary. We presented at the Thursday morning roundtable. We did some Know Your Rights presentations at the Northeast Community Center and one with the Syracuse City School District. We have had revolving interns from Syracuse University and their political science department, in which we've utilized to discuss Mythbusters, ad campaigns for targeted markets, and the reestablishment of the youth board with regard to the CRB to focus on middle school students and how we might do that. We also encouraged and facilitated the creation of a diverse citizens review board through the help of the council to make it more reflective of the community that we serve. We also did our annual training in board development, and we have the CRB meetings that are now live streamed, which is something that one of our constituents requested, so that when people can't make it to City Hall, they are able to view them. And we have corresponded with all 72 complainants who have outstanding cases from 2017 and 2018.
Very good, thank you. The staffing is the same this year. You've put in for the same this year as last, correct?
Yes, just with 2 individuals in my office on a full-time basis, other than the private investigators, which are on a contract basis, on a case-by-case kind of basis.
Okay. I'm going to open this up for questions, and I'm going to start with Floodjoy Grinnell.
I need you to come back to me. I'm still formulating. I'm still working on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey,
Renette, how you doing?
Good.
Thanks for everything you guys do. I remember there was, obviously I participated with discussions that we had with Chief Buckner about, the roles he saw of CRB and we had a lot of different points of view and all that. So I guess I would just ask for a check-in about how you feel it's going. I know it's a new chief and a new day and a new line of communication. So I would just be curious to hear an update from the last I spoke with you all about how, I remember there was some discrepancy about kind of the CRB having a second interview with people and the chief not feeling that was really beneficial from his perspective due to possible discrepancies that might be in the story. If an officer remembered a situation differently in the second interview, it could be used against him potentially and those kinds of things. So do you feel, at the moment, okay with how things are going, or do you still feel like you'd like to push that issue forward, or, yeah?
I would definitely still like to push that issue forward in terms of the ordinance, and that's what the ordinance allows us to do. And so in order for us to completely do our job and provide the service to the public that we're supposed to, then they need to comply with the ordinance, and we're not there yet. In terms of the communication that we've had with Chief Buckner, it has been positive. We've agreed to disagree on some key points. Some of the points had to do with whether or not our investigation was going to be professional when we had those conversations. And so I had to point out what we have tried to do to make sure that our investigations are professional. They had questions with regard to private investigators and kind of made that kind of suggestion. But we are not satisfied with where we are, but we do know that everything takes time, so we've tried to be patient. He has reestablished the Police Liaison Committee, and we have yet to meet, but it is on the radar to meet with them, which we believe is, again, another function of the ordinance, but also a very important function in which we'd have more communication with police officers that can clear up some of the questions that we have.
How often is the Police Liaison Committee supposed to meet annually?
So, in the past, the Police Liaison Committee has met at least once a quarter. And as of right now, we met one time in 2018, I want to say. Yes, one time in 2018, and we have worked to reestablish it. He has put some new members on the Police Liaison Committee that he feels will be more beneficial to both the department and the CRB. And so until that point in time that we can meet, I can't really assess as to how we're moving forward, but we have had lengthy discussions. He mentioned the fact that they are severely behind with regard to their 2017 cases, and behind with regard to the 2018 cases, which we have talked about. In terms of numbers, if you want to talk about those, we have 72 cases that are outstanding from 2017 and 2018, and we have a total of 31 cases right now in 2019. In terms of the 2017 cases, there are 20 of them which are outside of the 18-month time frame for which an officer can be disciplined, and that is something that we have continued to talk to the Office of Professional Standards about. Where are the reports? We continue to talk to the chief with regard to those things, so we are making him aware of where the improvements are needed. There are a total of 8 cases from 2018 with an outside that are outside the 18-month time frame, and we have 12 cases on our desk right now that I need to write up reports and continue to investigate. So there is a lot of work to do, and we appreciate the fact that the chief has decided to add someone to the Office of Professional Standards, which we believe could assist, but we are really doing a disservice to the community with the amount of backlog that the police department has entailed. And I can only give you numbers based on what has been received in the CRB office that was sent to the police department, because I can't tell you how many civilians have filed complaints directly with the police department and it has not arrived at our office. I will say that in the past there has been at least 6 months lapse between the time that a case went to the Office of Professional Standards and was delivered to our office, at which time it was difficult for me to contact the complainant at that point in time, because as we know, with the nature of Syracuse, people's telephone numbers are changing and they're moving frequently. So given that matter, it is a disservice to the community by the police department to wait that long to provide the CRB with a case.
Can I add something to that response? It's a great question, Joe. I think that the responses we've got from the chief so far in several meetings and conversation are basically two. One is that he's committed to implement all the requirements of the ordinance in terms of the backlog of cases that we haven't gotten from ops, in terms of reestablishing the police liaison committee, and in terms of open communication about his decisions about officers. But I think it's important to understand the CRB, if you read through the ordinance essentially has two major responsibilities. One is to hold hearings and make determinations about police misconduct. But the other, which gets paid less attention, is to make recommendations based on all the cases that we see. So every year, there have been recommendations submitted, and we have a summary of those recommendations over the last 5 years that we pulled together this year, and that'll be updated shortly. You've got a copy of the last version of that, and we'll update that and send it out. That's where we believe the CRB can have the greatest impact. The chief has the right to make determinations about discipline, and that's fine. And I'm not worried that he's skeptical about the CRB process. He's got to protect his troops. That's his job. And we can have those conversations. But what we do need to do is have conversations with the department, starting with the Police Liaison Committee, about all the specific recommendations that we've made over the last several years and see what's happening with those.
I'd like to add to that just that we have processed 94 complaints from 2017, and we processed 35 complaints from 2018, making a total of 129 cases from 2017 through 2018 that we did process. I want to make sure that we just don't get stuck on the amount that are outstanding, that we focus, that we were able to take care of some.
I'd also like to mention that our top recommendation to revise the use of force policy is now in process, so the chief has started that one.
What would be your wish list? If you had, I see that the private investigator, that item has gone up a lot with the professional services in the budget, so I understand that's reflective of both maybe the chief's wishes and your wishes. But if you had another wish list items of things that you need to help you do your jobs better, what would those be?
We have been working with the chief to establish monthly meetings so that then he can be aware of the backlog a lot sooner rather than later. We are hoping to establish a better rapport with the new recruits than what has been perceived in the past, and we're trying to do that by having a CRB presentation to the next class, which, as the chief stated, begins May 21st. We're going to have an introductory meeting with the Police Liaison Committee first to kind of hash out and make sure that they understand what the ordinance talks about, what's the purpose of the meeting, and then we'll have the full board, well, the members of that police accountability portion of the CRB to then meet with them. We just want the SPD to adhere to the ordinance in its totality. I mean, we really want them to focus on providing us the complaints in a timely manner within 1 business day. We appreciate the ordinance and the way that it's been set up, and we have never been able to, you as a council or the CRB, to benefit from the ordinance because the police department has always found some way to not adhere to the ordinance. So before we can talk about changes and things of that nature that is going to make it better, we have to first adhere to what we have and then be able to have the data and statistics to say why it doesn't work. So that would be it. Also, we made several recommendations with regard to the body-worn camera policy that we hope that is implemented. We also appreciate your conversations that you had with regard to it and your questions related to it. As Peter talked about, the policy recommendations are key. I mean, we're not really sure what policies have been implemented and not, because the lack of communication between the two departments has been as such. But we look forward to building that, and I believe that it's been more productive than it has been in years. And so I'm optimistic that it's going to get better, but we have a ways to go.
Building on Councilor Lovejoy-Grinnell's question, when you look at best practices around the country in terms of structure as well as resources, how do we stack up?
So in terms of, there's 3 different models of civilian oversight, which we talked about in our Thursday morning roundtable discussion. So we have certain aspects that other departments don't. So we have the ability to utilize subpoena power. We have the ability to have outside counsel for issues in which the corporation counsel is sort of has a conflict. So we stack up well with regard to the components that we have, other than the fact that they don't adhere to our ordinance. We have other departments, other cities have a lot more buy-in by the chief of police, a lot more buy-in by the department in which they participate actively in the CRB process, either through it being in their union contract, or that the chief provides the officers with guarantee when they get ready to testify, per se, in front of the CRB. So I think that that question can be better answered if the SPD was adhering to the ordinance. Then we could see where we would be able to change some things if we're not in the best practices. But as of right now, this is the best practice, and it's the reason the ordinance is the way that it is because the Common Council and the community wanted it this way. So we need to do our best to try to get there.
Madam President.
I'm good.
Thank you, sir.
So first, I'm going to express my appreciation for the outreach, which was something that wasn't happening prior, obviously, to you getting here, but I think it's very valuable. I have a question. And this question is related to questions I've asked prior to you coming as well. When a constituent comes to the CRB, what are they expecting you to be able to do?
That varies, and I try my best to make sure that they understand what the CRB can do and what the CRB cannot do. In the past, civilians have attempted to have the CRB be utilized as a way to reduce their charges within the criminal justice system. And I've explained to them in detail, and even when I see it in the complaint, if it says that I want these charges reduced, I'm automatically giving them a call and explaining to them, hello, but this is not what the CRB is used for. Also, when they are asking for documents in terms of the CRB so that they can utilize it in the criminal case, I'm also being very conscious, and I become very aware at the onset as to why they're really filing this complaint. And I explain to them at the onset in my initial interview with them that this is not what it's utilized for. And then that usually either has them to decide not to file the complaint, or now they're trying to backpedal and tell me what they really want now. So that has been a concern, and I think that continuing to do community outreach is going to help us alleviate that. I did have one gentleman tell me, well, if you can't get my traffic tickets reduced, then I don't want to go through with the process. And I said, well, thank you kindly for filing your complaint, and we'll move from there. But I do think that it's been a serious issue, and I think that's one of the things that has been a thorn in the CRB side in terms of what the community thinks it can be utilized for. Even attorneys for the defense in terms of criminal cases. They either will tell their client not to file a complaint because the DA's office is going to use it against them. So, I mean, it's a whole, we have a big educational piece with regard to the constituents in the community, and also defense attorneys, and to, I've had conversation with the DA's office and things of that nature when I hear these kind of things to help me to understand what has taken place in the past.
Right, because, obviously the request for charges reduced is often the belief that the CRB can actually fire police officers. And also, so let me I want to mention something that I mentioned before. I'm trying to put a lot of work on the chair. And this is all relative to compliance. So first I'll start with something I said last year, right? And I believe this is understood, but I'm just going to state it again for the record. The concern over compliance to the ordinance is unfortunately trumped by the state law that protects the union contract.
I understand that.
And I made the position before that if there's a doorway, it would lie in the union contract, and that would have to be found. Right? And so unless it could be validated or demonstrated that a request is in line with state law, then they'll always have a way to say no. Now, there is always certainly the power of the mayor, then to the chief, and then to comply them to come. But that's another issue. But I just want to kind of restate that for consideration that is, I'm preaching to the choir. All right. There was a recommendation I made before as well that as policy changes are developed, that they, from the time you develop them, are sent to the public safety chair.
Okay.
Because while some things may be a matter of policy, there may be some consideration that we could give as well.
Okay.
All right, and I made that recommendation to the previous executive director. I believe I made it to you as well. Again, not trying to put all this work on the chairman, but at least we're aware of things early instead of just in the annual or semi-annual report.
Okay.
If there's a potential for us to lend support, obviously it's greater if we know about a policy suggestion when it's made.
Okay.
Last thing is just my concern. The reason why I always ask the questions in regards to what they believe, and you know this already, is to assure one, and so I appreciate the fact that you said you explained to people, because it wasn't happening before, that we make clear to people what the department does, or what the board does, so that people, because prior to, I believe I had mentioned, people would come and would complain about the fact that CRB wasn't doing what they thought it would do, or that CRB is not helping them at all because they thought they were supposed to reduce their charges. But if people, I appreciate the fact that you're making it clear to people so that people are not maybe turned away or turned off when making use of the process. Showing people what their tools are in fact so that they can adequately use them. But I want to reemphasize purposefully here that I think it would be to the benefit of the CRB to alert the committee, certainly the chair, of whatever policy recommendations are going in, when they go in.
Okay.
All right, appreciate it.
We will definitely do that in the future, and I will forward you over what we have. As you know, our annual report is coming up, and we've added in some with regard to mental health, and a one mind kind of department that we're suggesting that the police department kind of join forces with, and we'll send you a copy of that and the information with regard to that, and the recommendations we previously made with regard to the body-worn camera policy, which are key. And we had one more recommendation with regard to resource officers in the school district, so we'll make sure that we forward those to you in a timely manner prior to that point. In terms of the body-worn camera policy and their community meeting that they had, or their council meeting with regard to it, they, stated that, there could be time for some revisions, but past that point, there was nothing that was set in stone. I was advised that the use of force policy recommendations that the CRB has continued to make over the years was placed side by side while they were drafting the use of force policy, and we don't know if that's, side by side is a lot different than
Completely ignored.
so, but in terms of that, other than the mental health one, that was the new one, and it's been a little bit contingent with regard to the resource officers in schools. So that's one of our biggest things, as Peter, our chair, alluded to, is to make sure that some of the ones that we previously recommended, only one that I know of was we recommended that they put seatbelts inside the transport vehicles. And I was at a proceeding and I learned that they did that. And that was one of the CRB recommendations. So some of the things is just the lack of communication between the departments in terms of what they may have already implemented that we don't know until something comes up and it's made at the forefront.
We're also glad to hear the chief say a little while ago that they're looking at the pursuit policy, because that has to do with a recommendation that's been made over the years as well.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question, Renette?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know you guys get some of the stuff we get too when you get people in this chamber. Have you thought about bringing in your budget, security?
We do have an allocation, I believe, in the budget with regard to security. And the security officer that's downstairs, he's watching while things are going on. And he, and if we feel that it's contentious, I guess we're supposed to get in contact with them. But we have considered that, but we've also been cautious because we don't want to send the wrong impression to the community that we expect it to be a situation or that we are going to have that sort of hostility between community members.
We don't expect it either, but we don't expect to be in this chamber and have community constituents flipping out on us either, so.
Absolutely. So it's definitely something we've considered, and we've kind of been on the fence, and we don't know if we, if we do it as a precautionary measure and just kind of have it there. So if something happens, opposed to saying that we now are going to based upon this particular situation. But it's something that we would be intrigued on learning what you think would be best, because in terms of how it looks and in terms of how we can manage it so that it doesn't escalate based upon the security being there.
Thank you. Peter, on page 64, where's your salary come from? Which line?
I don't think there's a line in for that, Tim.
No line.
I think somebody made a mistake.
There's not many people who sit in that chair who don't get paid to do it. So I
Notice I'm
thank
the only
you.
one at the table not getting paid today.
I thank you. Well, we get paid barely, so we understand. So I appreciate everybody who contributes to the CRB to make it work, because you get $131,000 to 81 in the proposed budget, and I'm sure you count every dollar when it's that small. So the police department this is probably where the expectations and the reality of what you can do are out of line. They get 350 times the money that you have to be a vessel to oversee them. So that's like less than 1/3% of what we do. And I think it's really important that we have you, that the police are there to follow through, regardless of whether people misunderstand the expectation. I know when there's a moment where you feel unsatisfied with the police service, it's important to have recourse that is outside of the police department, because government struggles with transparency, but I don't think any department struggles with transparency more than the police department. So it's really important to have that, let's say, circuit breaker. And as a resident, I appreciate the opportunity for, if nothing else, to know that there's a place to document whatever happened that isn't just with an officer, where their own clouded processes can leave you feeling unsatisfied, even if they are following through and issuing punishments. So I don't have any other questions other than to say thank you to all involved.
Thank you.
Councilor Allen,
You can't say regardless of expectations.
any closing remarks?
We just look forward to continuously building upon the CRB process, continuing to streamline the process, continuing to build better community relations, better relations with the SPD, and we thank the council for their support that they've had so far since I've been here. I think that we've tried to increase our communications with you, and it's been great. And I feel like we're moving in the right direction, but we still have a long road. So I appreciate the time, and thank you for the Public Safety Committee. And we've kind of had conversations on a regular, and I appreciate the time that you've given us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That will conclude today's budget.